At the start of the film, we meet a girl named Ellen. She is praying and asking for a companion, an angel or any being who can hear her and come to her. Sadly, her prayer is answered by Count Orlok. He hears her, accepts her as his lover, and calls her to him. Ellen leaves her house, and Orlok tells her, "You are not made for humans. You are mine, and you belong with me. Accept me as your lover." Ellen agrees. Right after, Orlok grabs her and begins telling her a story. Then, the scene changes to a few years later. Ellen is now married to a man named Thomas, who works as a real estate agent. They live in a small town called Wisburg in Germany. The year is 1838. By the way, Wisburg is a made-up town. Ellen has memories of her dark past with Orlok, but the townspeople don't know about it. Orlok still has a psychic connection with her. Since her marriage, Ellen has been having scary dreams that make her feel uneasy. She stays close to Thomas all the time and doesn't leave him alone. One day, Thomas's boss gives him an important task. He tells Thomas, "We have a new client, Count Orlok. He wants to buy a building in our town called Grunwald Manor. The Count currently lives in a castle in Transylvania. I promised him that I'd send my agent to finalize the deal, and I've chosen you for this job. You'll need to travel to Transylvania. The trip will take 3 weeks. The Count will give you a big commission if you do the deal well. If you succeed, I'll also promote you." Thomas has to leave his new wife and go on this long journey. His boss adds, "I understand you're newly married and need money for your new life together." Thomas knew how important this job was, so he couldn't say no, but when he told Ellen that he had to go far away, she tried to stop him. She said, "I've been having scary dreams. I see my loved ones dying, and I feel very uneasy. Please don't go." Thomas explained that this trip was important for their future. He told her the dreams were just dreams and not to worry. Meanwhile, we see Hanno, who is secretly working with Count Orlok. Hanno is doing a strange ritual, and it's revealed that the deal for Grunwald Manor is actually a trap. In the end, Thomas convinces Ellen, though she feels very sad. Before leaving, Thomas takes Ellen to stay with his friend Frederick and his wife. Frederick is a wealthy ship merchant with 2 daughters, and his wife is expecting another baby. Ellen gives Thomas her locket and asks him to write to her every day. Thomas promises her, then takes his horse and starts his journey to Transylvania. After traveling a long way, Thomas reaches a small village near Transylvania. He asks to stay for the night, but when he mentions the castle, the villagers get scared and ask him to leave. Thomas offers them double the money, and they finally agree but warn him not to go to the castle. That night, Thomas sees the villagers going somewhere with a naked girl. Curious, he follows them. They reach a spot where a decayed corpse, which is a vampire, is lying. The villagers turn out to be vampire hunters. One of them drives a stake into the vampire's chest, making it writhe in pain and vomit blood. Thomas wakes up in fear, thinking it was a nightmare, but when he notices mud on his feet, he realizes it was real. He finds the village empty, and the villagers have taken his horse to stop him from going to the castle. But Thomas is determined and starts walking. As night falls, Thomas reaches a crossroads and feels lost. Suddenly, a creepy black carriage appears. The door opens by itself, and even though everything feels ominous, Thomas gets in. He's scared but closes his eyes. When he opens them, he's in front of the castle. The castle gate opens, and Thomas sees Count Orlok, a tall, intimidating figure. The Count greets him coldly, complaining that Thomas took too long to arrive. When Thomas apologizes, the Count tells him, "Don't call me sir, call me my lord." His deep, eerie voice makes Thomas obey out of fear. The Count offers Thomas food and drink. While cutting bread, Thomas accidentally cuts his hand. Seeing the blood, Count Orlok's vampire instincts take over, and he attacks Thomas. But he doesn't kill him. The next morning, Thomas wakes up confused. He thinks what happened was just a bad dream, but when he sees bite marks on his chest, he assumes it was a rat. That night, the Count appears again. He notices Ellen's locket and asks to see it. Then, he forces Thomas to sign a contract written in a foreign language. The Count offers gold to persuade him, and under pressure, Thomas signs the contract. Thomas tells the Count, "I'm not feeling safe here. I'm having nightmares. I want to leave, but the Count refuses to let him go. When Thomas asks for his locket back, the Count leaves without replying. The next morning, Thomas wakes up with another bite mark on his chest. He realizes something is very wrong and decides to leave, but the castle gate is locked. While searching for another way out, he finds a basement with a large coffin. Inside the coffin, Count Orlok is lying still. When Thomas saw Count Orlok lying, he thought to kill him as the villagers had killed a vampire. Tried, but suddenly, the Count wake up and attacked Thomas. The scene shift to Alan not feeling well. The professor concluded that Alan was being influenced by a supernatural force, possibly connected to the Count. He suspected that the connection was through a mental or spiritual link, heightened by her vulnerability and past trauma. He explained to Frederick and Anna that such forces often prey on the emotionally weak or those with unresolved fears. Ellen's condition worsened. At night, she would scream and cry out in a language no one understood. Professor Alvin worked tirelessly to uncover the connection between Ellen and the Count. He delved into ancient texts, learning about a ritual where a vampire could bind itself to a soul, using it to amplify its power and walk freely in daylight. Thomas tried to escape from Count Orlok, but Orlok woke up and Thomas had to flee. Meanwhile, Count Orlok was holding Ellen's locket and chanting in Latin, seemingly casting a spell. Ellen was getting possessed, and in the castle, Orlok transformed into a vampire and bit Thomas, drinking his blood. Dr. Wilhelm was worried about Ellen's deteriorating health and discussed her condition with Frederick. Ellen was behaving strangely, and Dr. Wilhelm suggested taking her to Professor Franz, who specialized in mental illnesses. Thomas, meanwhile, escaped from the castle by jumping into a river. Some native people found him and took him to their camp, where they treated his wounds. When Thomas regained consciousness, a lady warned him that he was in the shadow of the Count and shouldn't leave. Thomas, however, was determined to return to his wife Ellen, as he knew Count Orlok was after her. Despite the natives' warnings, Thomas left for Wisburg on horseback. The next scene showed Count Orlok on a ship, where his coffin was being transported. His purpose was to reach Ellen. Meanwhile, his servant, Knock, was waiting for his lord's arrival. Rats on the ship were spreading the plague, and one by one, everyone on board was falling ill. It became clear that wherever Orlok went, he brought destruction and disease. The people of Wisburg would now have to face not only the ancient vampire but also the deadly plague. On the ship, everyone was dying, and one man realized that the rats were coming from the grave. He tried to kill them but was killed by Orlok. In Wisburg, Dr. Wilhelm and Frederick met with Professor Franz to discuss Ellen's condition. Ellen, meanwhile, was getting worse, and it seemed that time was running out. Professor Franz and Dr. Wilhelm were trying to help Ellen, who was tied up and behaving strangely. Ellen told them about her dreams and how she felt her soul was being pulled away. She also mentioned that she had psychic abilities and could sense future events. Meanwhile, Thomas was having nightmares and was worried about Ellen. Ellen had a vision of Nosferatu, who told her that she had 3 days to decide whether to join him or lose her loved ones. Nosferatu revealed that Thomas had unknowingly signed an agreement with him, allowing him to take Ellen away. The next morning, Ellen found Anna dead, and her body was infested with rats. Ellen realized that Nosferatu was behind the gruesome scene. Frederick and Anna told Ellen that she was imagining things, but Ellen knew that Nosferatu was real. Professor Franz discovered an ancient book that held the secrets of Nosferatu. The book revealed that Nosferatu was a vampire from the Carpathian Mountains. Franz decided to meet with Thomas and Ellen to warn them about the danger they were in. As the city burned due to the plague and riots, Franz and Frederick argued about what to do next. Frederick believed that Nosferatu should be allowed to return to his homeland, while Franz thought that they should try to stop him. The scene ended with a sense of urgency and danger looming over the characters. Nosferatu will be sleeping in his grave. People will destroy him. Frederick was worried and throws them out of his room. Franz says that if Nosferatu tastes Ellen's blood, he will attack again. On the other hand, Thomas is getting better and wants to leave the city. Ellen tells him a secret. When she was young, she summoned Nosferatu and chose him as her lover. She promised to be with him forever. Franz reads a book and finds out that Alan is the only one who can destroy Nosferatu. Meanwhile, Anna sees Nosferatu drinking the blood of her children. She cannot escape and Nosferatu kills her. The next morning, Frederick's children and Anna are buried. Everyone decides it's time to destroy Nosferatu. Thomas, Franz, and the doctor go to find Nosferatu's coffin. Alan prepares to face Nosferatu. When Thomas returns, he finds Alan and Nosferatu dead in bed. Nosferatu is destroyed, and the plague in the city ends. The movie ends here. To summarize, Alan, a psychic, summoned Nosferatu when she was young and promised to be with him forever. She forgets her promise and marries Thomas. Nosferatu comes to claim her, causing destruction in the city. In the end, Alan destroys Nosferatu, but dies in the process.